Today we're going to talk about the clear light mind. Well, the mind is made of light. In fact, everything is made of light. So it makes it easy for us to feel light about our life, levity, joy, and we'll explain how this works.
Because it's made of light, of course, we can miss it. You can't really see light, you only see its reflections. Because light's invisible, we can overlook it.
And part of the spiritual path is learning how to not overlook it and how to embrace it and how to use it for our awakening, right? It's called enlightenment for a reason. It's very much about light and bringing light to darkness and alleviating suffering for the benefit of all beings.
And this is what we're going to kind of talk about in terms of how to use that, how it works. And of course, in terms of Buddhist philosophy, clear light mind is also called shunyata, or emptiness, because of course light appears to be empty. So the nature of the mind is also nature of light, therefore also the nature of emptiness.
It also manifests as a kind of spaciousness as well.
Since it doesn't occupy any space, it's also called empty. So these are just ways to look at it from various perspectives. But let's go back to the very beginning, from when we were born or even conceived, and from that point forward, we're thrown into objects.
First, we're thrown into the womb. Being born into a body or for consciousness to take on a body is quite a process, right? The consciousness and the body are very different ways of manifesting and takes some getting used to.
So it's not surprising that our entire life is occupied with form, with objects, and how to live in it. And even before language, learning to talk, and independent motion, learning to walk, there are a couple of years spent with the basics in terms of how the senses work, how the body works, learning to move your hands and your eyes and all that. And in the process of that, we learn to call that me. We learn to call that I. We learn to call everything mine that affects us.
Later, we graduate to learning how to interact with other people and other forms.
First through our bodies in terms of mom and the family, and then through our feelings in terms of whether we like something or don't like something.
Communicating.
And eventually...
And processing. Yeah. Processing our interactions with others, processing our interactions with forms that manifest externally, and processing our feelings and our thoughts, our various arisings.
So, like anything in form, it models itself on something. So an acorn is going to look like an oak. So granted that our mom and dad were our oak trees and we're the acorns, it's not surprising that we've modeled our whole relationship to form and structure and feelings of thought initially around our conditioning and our parental structure.
Even if we think we don't want to, even if we reject how our parents related to other forms, we are imprinted by them. So we really have, in a sense, not much choice other than to manifest similar to the ways that they did and do.
That's right. And by the time we're old enough to rebel, which is, 13 through 75, by the time we're old enough to rebel and think about it, it's kind of too late in a way because the real building blocks are there. Now we can modulate or moderate the particular forms or structures about how we go things. We can change our gender orientation.
We can adapt.
We can change our diet, but the groundwork of the thing is, and the causes is there and present.
If you were born in Canada, you're pretty likely to manifest similar to a Canadian. If you're born in the UK, it's pretty likely you'll manifest like a UK person.
And if you're born in space, you'll kind of manifest like a space being, which most people who look at the spiritual life figure that anybody who's involved in the spiritual life is a bit of a space cadet.
Again, we can do things to moderate this, right? You may move to another country, or you may decide you don't want to be like your parents and make efforts to manifest differently, but that imprint is still there.
So all this kind of material buildup makes everything seem quite solid. And so this sense of self is built around this sense of solidity. It's clear that things are objects, both thoughts, feelings, and ideas. We call them objects. And these objects have relationships to each other. We call them relationships in the human sense, but also concepts and ideas. Success also is a form of a concept. It's a structure.
Relationship. When we talk about objects, and a relationship is an object, it's partly a concept, right? For example, love is an object. It's the concept that we have of love.
So the most ephemeral of all our objects, of course, are our thoughts, because they're mental constructs. And then feelings are a little less ephemeral. And by the time we get to the body, it seems very solid. But,
and these thoughts we call mental objects.
But all of it is ephemeral. It seems solid, but fundamentally it's ephemeral. And perhaps the easiest access to this is our sense of our dreams. Our dreams seem very ephemeral, but they're made again of objects. They're made of visual and emotional and mental objects that we see in the dream world. But as you know, in dream, there is no object. There is no inherent object. It's an arising, independent of you often, although there are connections. So this idea that dreams are also made of light.
Dreams are a great example of that because, of course, dreams happen usually in the dark, usually at nighttime. Usually our eyes are closed, so it's dark in that sense too. And yet they can seem so vivid, right? They can seem so colorful. They can seem so full of light. So that's a good example of how mental objects are made of light.
So from Buddhist perspective, everything's made of light, therefore everything is ephemeral. The degree of solidity is based on a law called the principle of relative densities, the two relative densities of things meeting. When you clap your hands, they in fact don't actually ever touch. What you're experiencing is the sound wave of the breaking of the molecules of the air that make them seem like they touch. So this Buddhism and quantum physics are beginning to see things quite similarly in the sense that there is no inherent object to be found. And if there's no inherent object to be found, and I am identified with all the objects I think that are inherent, then there's no me to be found inherently. So in this sense, you should maybe imagine a rainbow.
It looks like an object, and yet we can pass through it.
A child may go chasing it. Oh, let me go chase the rainbow. And if you've ever driven through a rainbow, of course, you recognize it disappears before you get to it, and it's not there when you're in it. And when you come out of it, it's behind you. So this rainbow refracted light reflects on what the mind is doing with apparently solid objects. The mind is turning things into solidity by the tendency of the density of the light to move from the gaseous elements all the way down to the heavy metals like iron and lead. But again, iron, lead, they are condensed light.
We can think of the mind as a prism that the light passes through. So when light passes through a prism, it bends and it manifests in different ways on the other side. And the mind has a similar function.
So the exercise that you might think about is think about your life and everything, all the objects in it as kind of rainbow light, and that your prism is the nature of your mind itself. So if you go the other direction from the refracted light through the prism, you get to the clear light. And the clear light is invisible, it's intangible. You can't really point to it and say, there it is. There's no way to identify it as a thing in and of itself, other than with the word light. And so the sense of I or me is the same. The I in me only appears on the colored side of the prism. When you bring the light back through the prism where it becomes clear, the I itself evaporates, yet still exists when it goes through the prism.
Right. As we like to say, we're not saying that the I doesn't exist. We're saying that it doesn't exist the way that we think it does.
The light is invisible, so the light of the mind is invisible. But that doesn't, as Sensei says, that does not mean non-existent. The clear light mind is obviously spacious, as it occupies no space. It's inherently not an object, since it holds no form. It is radiant and luminescent, because what happens after it goes through the prism? We go, oh, look what the light did. So we say it's radiant and luminescent. And you can see it in the dark. Even in the dark, the mind is a one of light.
Because the mind is made of light, there's no inherent reason that we need to be caught up in any sort of struggle. So imagine struggling with light. Imagine clinging to light, or having aversion towards light.
Or loving the light. I'm in love with the light. I'm in love with I hate the light. Right? Kind of, these are all other side of the mirror, other side of the prism that gets us caught up because we forget that the nature of the mind is spacious, clear, radiant, blissful, and because of that, inherently compassionate.
It's light, the opposite of heavy.
But you can also think of the mind as a mirror. If the mind reflects whatever is put in front of it. So if you put a dog in front of your mind, you see a dog. If you put a horse in front of your mind, you see a horse. But the argument from the fifth patriarch was, or the applicant to be the sixth patriarch said, your mind is like a mirror, polished bright, so no dust can alight. That's a very good teaching. That talks about clinging and aversion and not doing that. But there was a kind of one teaching a little bit farther on, which was from the future sixth patriarch of Zen, or Chan in China, who said basically, where there's no mirror, where can the dust alight? So since you are as empty as the empty mirror or the empty prism, all suffering is built and constructed by your sense of solidity.
So our lives are one kind of prism for this light to pass through. So there's a certain amount of allowing the light to pass through as it naturally does. And there's a certain amount of we get to help determine how that light passes through, how that light is going to manifest in our lives in terms of relationships and career and work and spiritual practice.
So what we put in front of the mirror is karma. When you think, well, I'm not choosing what appears in front of my mind, but in fact we are. It's based on previous karma and present supporting circumstances. So when we talk about freeing ourselves from karma or liberating karma, we're really liberating ourselves about the confusion about the nature of the condensed light that we cling to and we adhere to. Because fundamentally, of course, at death, you're going to return to where you came from, which is the light. And if you have that sense of the light while you're living, then death becomes a very subtle transition phase rather than a shocking transition phase. The entire Buddhist path is a journey from confusion about the nature of solidity, its objects, attachments, and aversions, karma, to back to or recognition of the inherent clear light mind that's sitting there even as we speak.
Our conditioning, in a sense, we could say that it has trained us to believe that rainbows are permanent. And we try to grab onto them and hold them and shape them how we'd like to, rather than perceiving them as light and enjoying them for being what they are.
So all our spiritual practices work it backwards. So from the light mind of Dzogchen and Mahamudra, clear light mind is another word for Dzogchen or Mahamudra. But the earlier stages of the path of the spiritual path work with the senses. So they work with the solidity of the senses and the solidity of the feelings and the solidity of the mental objects. And they introduce practices to help you transit from a belief in the solidity of things to a better understanding of the radiance or the rainbow-like quality of the appearances, and that's called tantric practice or deity practice.
The emptiness of those things.
In the middle stages of the path, they focus more on the understanding of compassion and loving kindness that recognizes our relationship to these apparent solid arisings or objects, etc. Requires a rethinking of the view. So that's Mahayana. The Mahayana is very much about deconstructing our belief in the solidity and the reality, inherent reality of things, until we arrive at the apex, which is Mahamudra, or Dzogchen. Dzogchen meaning great perfection, basically. Great completedness or the great wholeness, or in brief, an ongoing unitiveness or wholeness. And the awareness of this in Dzogchen is called Rigpa, a naked awareness of the mind.
All our struggles and worries and dissatisfaction really arise from us trying to relate to the light as though it were a permanent object. When we keep in mind, in the light of the mind, that they're impermanent, that all objects are made of light, our struggles and our dissatisfaction and our worries magically dissipate.
So the aim of something like Dzogchen is to recognize the ground of being as shunyata, empty, luminous,
Radiant.
dewa, natural, ultimately good, rooted in compassion and loving kindness. This is the essence of it. And in Dzogchen practice, there are two principal methods to do that. One is called Trekcho and the other is called Togel, which means respectively cutting through and leap over, crossing over.
Our work as spiritual practitioners is to realize this clear light of mind. All the spiritual methodologies are designed to help us do this. And then to manifest it, to manifest this clear light of mind through the prism of our lives or the prism of objects, loving kindness and compassion.
So you're either on one side of the prism and kind of a little bit in prison, or you're on the other side of the prism, which means you're in the clear light mind and free. And the dialogue, being able to go back and forth between those relationships, is called skill and means, or upaya, or method. And it's what the spiritual teaching is focused on, helping you realize.
Some teachings say that compassion is one hand and then skill and means is the other, and that we need both.
So, heart's desire, true nature of mind, is yours for the taking, if we can put it that way. And you just have to be like Alice in Wonderland and go through that rabbit hole of the prism and see what is there in the natural emptiness of the clear light mind. The metaphors of the prism or the mirror are ways to help the student or the aspirant practitioner to get a better look at how that works and manifests. And so where it gets thick and difficult is when we get into taking objects to be real. Then we form relationships around them that are based on greed and trying to get.
Attachment or aversion.
Or aversion, pushing them away.
Based in hatred. I don't want this.
Yeah. Or confusion, the idea that they're actually inherently real. And I think that's... Anything you want to add?
No, I think, well, we could go on, right?
We could.
The more permanent that we think objects are, the more we try to grab them, being attached to them based in greed, or the more we try to push them away, which is a form of aversion based in hatred or ill will. And when we realize that all objects are made of light, that it's impossible to be attached to them or to push them away, then we allow things to arise and pass away naturally as they do, as thoughts do, in the mind. And again, the suffering, any suffering we're experiencing subsides of its own nature.
So, for instance, when you're doing the Anapanasati meditation, the meditation on the breath, the rise and fall, when
Awareness of the breath.
When it turns to insight, it becomes awareness of rise and fall. One of the meditations, the companion meditations in that practice, is meditation on the light. And so they suggest that you meditate on how the light falls on things. So dappled leaves or the shades of green. So rather than getting involved in green as the color, which would be more object dense, you see the reflected nature of the light. And this meditation on the light is very much a companion piece to the meditation on the breath, which the Buddha supposedly awakened on, meditation on the rise and fall of the breath and the nature of the light. The question we'd like you to reflect on is like, what is the nature of your experience of the light? But not so much from the point of view of some highfalutin meditation experience you had once or yesterday, but more a case of how you reflect on that day to day in your movement through your world. Do you spend any time thinking about the other side of the prism? And if you don't, can you think of ways that you might help yourself to contemplate the other side of the prism?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
We can hear you very well.
Great. My question is about, that issue with seeing the solidity of objects. Like my training's been being proactive and seeing what needs to be done, kind of that Capricornian idea, and it's very kind of materially orientated, yet kind of with the spiritual big picture, like seeing things are light and empty. So how do I kind of reconcile those two things?
Ooh, such a great question, Richard.
Good question, Richard.
So this is the big challenge for every spiritual practitioner, is to be living simultaneously in the world of relative truth, which is the world of objects, and in the world of absolute truth, which is the world of light, of spaciousness, of emptiness, of shunyata. And leveraging one to support the other. Now, when we're in the relative world, for example, Richard's talking about his Dharma training. He lives here at Clear Sky. And just like everywhere else and everyone else, it takes a certain amount of activity to run a retreat center like Clear Sky. And because we're spiritual practitioners, and especially because it's a retreat center, we're also trying to dwell in emptiness and spaciousness and light all of the time. I think this is where spiritual practitioners get a little bit of a stereotype. Like someone's, a police officer pulls you over for speeding and asks for your driver's license, and you go, I am one with the universe. Right? He's just going to give you a more expensive ticket if you do that. However, we can draw on our sense of spaciousness to not get stressed out if we get pulled over for a speeding ticket, and treat the traffic police person with loving kindness and compassion, and stay in a good state regardless of the outcome. And special bonus is it will probably be a better outcome, no matter how you look at it, if we draw on our sense of emptiness to relate in the relative world.
So Sensei is talking from personal experience with traffic officers.
If, for example, someone you know gets pulled over.
So, Richard, another take on the same question. I think maybe the easiest way to meet that relative truth, absolute truth that Sensei was referring to, is respect, and it's really a respect for the integrity and the totality of the moment you're in. So if I am lifting my glass of water, I try to do it as mindfully as possible. Try to stay with the motion from beginning to end, and importantly in the transition. So from when I'm reaching for the glass back to the dialogue back. So transitions in the material world are a really great way of seeing the bending of the light and how the light shifts and moves. So this is why Zen monasteries, you sweep the floor, you polish the brass, you clean the lights, and you do it every day in spite of the fact that it's spotless. It isn't about the actual action you're involved in, it's about the mindfulness that you bring to it. And then you watch the arisings that happen, whether you're bored or restless or irritated or happy through that action, and you try to see those arisings as also emptying of the light. So it's a kind of respect for your own life and energy to be with where you are and what you're doing in the moment, because it's the only life you have is in the moment. That's the only life you ever get. And so the more you can respect that moment and see the emptiness and act with integrity in relationship to the object, the tool, the mind, the feelings, the thoughts, then the clear light mind is more obviously there in the radiance of your experience and the radiance of how you meet it. And this is contagious.